is. Stephen Betts fixed the grandfather clock.
Oh, we heard it last night, yeah.
He came last night. Yesterday he came, took the guts out and said, oh, well, 3 to 5 months usually. That afternoon, later that afternoon, he came back and had it working. Okay, let us open the public hearing on the jet ski law. Stand for the pledge.
Over here, in the corner here.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right at 6:30. We'll start. Okay, the purpose of this public hearing is to hear public comment on the following resolution. Whereas the Round Lake Village Board of Trustees wishes to amend Chapter 168 of the Village Code to provide that personal watercraft may not be operated within the Village of Round Lake or launched from real property owned by the Village of Round Lake. And whereas the Board of Trustees finds that the proposed action is a Type 2 action as defined by 6 NCRR 617.2, and no further action is necessary to comply with the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas the Round Lake Village Board of Trustees held a public hearing concerning the proposed amendment, Chapter 168 of the Code of the Village of Round Lake, to provide that personal watercraft may not be operated within the Village of Round Lake or launched from real property owned by the Village of Round Lake on the 6th day of April at 6:30 at the Round Lake Village Hall, 49 Burlington Ave, Round Lake, New York, at which time and place all persons desiring to be heard were heard. So that is what we are having a hearing on. Anybody has any comments in favor or in opposition to this, they will be heard now. Little explanation of this does not in any way ban jet skis from Round Lake itself, because we only can control what the portions that Round Lake owns. So if somebody launches one from the boat club or any private property, we have no say over that. So the floor is open for any comments. There were a couple of emails that came in that will be included in the record, as well as a report, the effects of motorized watercraft on aquatic ecosystems, that will also be included in the report.
Were the emails in favor of?
They were both opposed.
Opposed. Okay.
I mean, opposed to jet skis.
Okay, so in favor of the law.
legislation.
Okay, thank you for the resolution.
And also, the year-end Hudson and Mohawk River Valley's aquatic invasive species year-end report had some interesting numbers in it. Every year, DEC sponsors about 70 water stewards that hang out down at various boat launches, and they advise people about the dangers of invasive species. We have 2 down at the lake every year for the last few years. And they gather statistics and actually, of all the boat launches that they monitor, Round Lake is by far the busiest. They're about 70 days a year and 6 or 8 hours a day. And about 65% of the usage is kayaks, 18% is motorboats, and only 4% personal watercraft, for a total of, in those 70 days, 3,678 different boats. And that's a fair amount of boats. Yeah. So if there are no further comments on that, I will close the public meeting at 6:37 and open the public hearing on the 22-23 village budget. Chris.
Well, I said I had some questions.
Wow.
In looking at the year-end unrestricted fund balance, let's say, this 2021 year, it says it's going to be $803,000.
Slow down. Page 3.
Back to the coach. So my question is that amount?
Wait. Which one?
Well, I have it on page 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You have the newest?
No, I don't.
Oh,
Okay, so it's on page 3.
yeah, that'll probably have different number on it.
Well,
which is
the number at the bottom on that sheet, or.
Page 3.
Page 3. Yep.
Doesn't change the question. What does that number, it's still 803,000. Does that number include any of the other numbers shown on the front page? In other words, does that number include the 95,000 in the recreation reserve fund, or the 144,000 in the charitable reserve, the 98,000 in the DPW? It doesn't include any of those.
Those are separate.
Okay,
Dedicated reserve funds are separate.
so
Jessica, feel free to jump in.
okay, so we're ending the year this year with $803,000.
No, that was last year.
We're ending last year with
Right, we ended last year, yes.
When does the budget? fiscal
June 1st. June 1st to May 31st.
Okay, so we're adopting. Okay, I just get my years.
It's very annoying.
Okay, and it's my understanding that the village, in order to consider itself healthy, has to have a certain amount of cash on hand, to allow for the ups and downs of what you have to pay before money comes in, et cetera. But the thing that struck me was that at the end of 2018, we had $213,000.
At the end of when?
2017.
17, 18,
The
we had
first one.
$213,000. And so in 4 years, we increased the amount that's available by almost $600,000. Now, I'm assuming that some of that increase was the money that was paid to the village for the property sold. Is that, would you be safe to say that that was all $300,000 is included in there?
It was
425 or something like that.
420 within.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's one of the numbers that.
And I think that was paid over those years.
Yes.
Yeah, it came in.
Right,
Yeah, it came
100,
in.
110,000 a year.
Yep.
It came in periodically. I guess my point is that the $420,000 certainly added a lot to the amount of cash on hand that the village has as carry over in the budget. But even if you subtract that 400,000, we've doubled from the 200,000 to the 400,000. Do you have a number of what's considered to be, is it
3 to 4 months of your monthly operating budget is usually.
and
that'd
when
be-
we calculate that, do we include the $1 million that passes through the Round Lake budget for the fire department?
Yes.
So the $1 million that we get in and then the $1 million that we go out, we still keep a cushion to cover that money that we never have to cover. In other words, do we really consider that the $1 million that comes in for the fire department and that goes out for the fire department is part of operating expenses that we need to have cash on hand for? My point being is that the balance, has increased
Right.
dramatically.
If your point is we have too much in our fund balance, you're absolutely correct. And if you see a list of things underneath, those are some of the things that we've started spending the fund balance, the excess fund balance. 150,000 we proposed for replacing the ramp and the steps out front.
But if we put that into the budget, have we?
It doesn't really go into the budget per
But
se.
we do have a DPW equipment reserve.
Right,
Which
but
is
that,
$100,000 set aside for
right,
that.
but that wouldn't pay the estimated $150,000 for the
I know,
repairs of
so
this.
would it make sense so it doesn't look like we have this huge cash balance on hand to create other reserve funds so that,
To just create a municipal buildings reserve fund. There's no money in it yet. We had
Right.
talked about putting 150,000
We're way ahead of
into it. We just haven't resolved.
And then
Well,
tax stabilization would be another one.
And I
we're
think
looking
I
at.
also put in here that we're considering a tax stabilization fund.
Yeah.
So like if another pandemic hits and we'll have some cushion. The
well,
comptroller says that you shouldn't build it into your structural budget. You should keep that to a minimum. You should do it, spend it, put it in reserve funds on one shots, like, on some new equipment that you need, or repairs like, huge repairs like we have coming
I
up.
mean, I absolutely agree with, like the DPW, all the reserve funds, that we're setting, we're being conscientious spenders. We save money and then we buy something, rather than buy something and then figure out where the money comes from. I mean, that's just good planning. It just seemed to me that even subtracting the $400,000, the amount of money on hand has grown tremendously. This year, we're removing $17,000 out of that balance by lowering the tax rate. But at that rate, it'll take 20 years to reduce the balance back to where it was 4 years ago.
Yes, one of the things that we'll be considering at the next meeting is how to fund a new, the big trucks we have that have salters on them.
Yeah.
We're looking at getting a new one of those. That's about 160, 213. So that's a big chunk. So we'll take some of that out of fund balance, maybe some out of water fund balance.
Would it make more sense to add more to the DPW equipment reserve since we have such a
Eventually, we'll do something like that in order to buy it. You don't buy directly out of unfunded or unallocated fund balance. You have to put that in a code, then spend it from that
How
code.
much, I didn't find it, we're putting another $40,000 in the equipment fund this year.
How much
Yeah,
more
I
are we
don't know
putting
what
in?
was in the budget this year to add to the DPW?
Probably wasn't that much because I knew that we would be spending from UFB, unallocated fund balance.
Okay, well, I guess
Usually it's around
11. Okay.
Just so we're clear about what your question or what you're getting at here, Chris, are you getting at we should be creating more reserve funds, or are you getting at we should be reducing taxes more? I just wanted to kind of get a clarity on what you're getting at with your question.
If the board chooses to add more to reserve funds so that the unappropriated balance comes down to be more in proportion to guidelines, I don't have an objection to, that type of, forward-thinking planning. But if we're going to sit here with what to me is a vast amount of money in the unappropriated fund balance or the unrestricted fund balance, and we're going to reduce that by reducing, paying $17,000 into the general budget, out of that fund, it's going to take us 20 years to reduce that balance. Now, I know that the village is kept within the guidelines by the state for, what the tax, the amount that's, been raised by taxes. But, the 7% or 8% tax reduction isn't really a tax reduction for most residents, since in the last time Malta reassessed the village, most of the people I spoke to, I didn't go examine all the records, our assessments went up at least 15%. And when I look at the amount of money that's raised by taxes, I know that there's adjustments for growth and all the rest of that. The village is collecting 7, 8, 9% more in taxes every year. And if the fund balance is going to get that large, it would seem that a greater tax rate reduction would be in order. If you want to justify that you need the money, then my point is put it somewhere where it shows that you need it, rather than just having a whole giant pile of money. And then the only other point I'll make is we can have the exact same discussion about the water balance.
I actually had this discussion with Gary about the water balance, because I think that's actually more of a clear cut situation.
Well, I mean, when you look at $800,000, that's pretty clear, and I think it's a little bit disingenuous to say that we need 3 months of reserve for the $1 million fire department money, because that money comes in and out of the village. The fire department doesn't get their money until the village gets paid, so that's not like, there's no risk in there other than, like if Malta and Boston's father decided to not pay the bill, that would be a whole other, let's not go there. But the water fund, I don't have the exact numbers, but it seems like, we're talking about the debt service portion of the water bill.
Mhm.
And I don't know how many users we're up to. My guess was, we used to have about 330. Based on the numbers that are in here, we have about 460 now.
446, I think, around.
So since the debt is unchanged, shouldn't the fixed portion of the water bill just be in proportion to the, if we have 30% more water users, shouldn't we have a 30% lower debt payment? And how much did we reduce the?
By about $80 per year this year, so
So about.
So we are in
about
agreement.
20%.
So we are in agreement.
We went from 398 down to 310. So so we 80 out of 400 is a fifth. Yeah, so 20% reduction.
We are in agreement that the fund balance is too high. That's certainly true. And
Would it make sense then to make an adjustment that's more in proportion to the number of users? I mean, the number of users went up 30%, the bill went down 20%.
Mhm.
My logic says, where did all the extra money go? The answer's in the paper here. It went into the water balance. It went into the water fund. It's got so much money in the water fund.
Yeah, I think part of it, again, you can make the argument that we need to plan forward for future infrastructure needs and not bond everything out to the max like we did the previous time. But yes, I think that well, we originally didn't have a reduction that large, as far as I remember.
No.
The original budget
Right.
was not an $80 per year reduction. It was substantially less than that. So
yeah.
Okay.
And part of it, we also basically found out that we could use some of that fund reserve for the new truck. So,
Because the truck is used partially to.
yeah, I mean,
service
yeah,
water.
I mean, our employees are paid from all 3 funds, so it makes sense that our equipment is paid for from all 3 funds. So that could conceivably take a pretty big
Well, I
chunk.
mean, the water reduction is, when you look at $28,000 and, perhaps $100,000 too much in the water fund, in 3 or 4 years to amass the money, 3 or 4 years to,
Right.
Get it back down to appropriate levels is, I don't think it's unreasonable. I know you don't want to make it too low and then 2 years from now have to, make it jump all around and raise it up again. But the general fund, though, it does seem like it has, that'll be it. That'll be the end of my opinion. The general fund looks like it has an awfully lot of money based on this budget.
Agreed, and we are addressing that. Thank you. Anyone else? Anybody?
We hit 7 o'clock, though. I know that, doesn't matter.
Zoom is on, right?
Zoom is on, should be recording.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, that was at the quarter hour.
Oh, that was.
Are you able to see hands raised or anything on that?
I cannot.
Or anybody's logged in?
Chris, if you see any hand raised,
I
just let me know.
always, vaguely see myself in an invisible Tom Peters.
Oh, he's here.
Tom is here?
Well, his name is up there. He doesn't, I don't know if he's got video on. No, it doesn't show on that screen. It only
Oh,
shows
I know,
on
because I
this.
have it extended as opposed to.
Yeah, leave it like that. I'm tired of looking at myself.
Yes, I am recording. Tom, can you hear me by any chance?
Yes, I can.
All right, good, we're good. Thank you. I'll mirror the displays now. You're back on. Okay, so the budget hearing is closed at 5:53 and we will open 6:53. We've got to change that. And we will open the general meeting in the Village of Round Lake. Speaking of the international, the new international truck, you have the information. And so for the next meeting, take a look it over, and between now and then, at the next meeting, we'll figure out how to fund it, the purchase.
So this is a new quote that we got today. We spoke with him at length. John and I had him on speaker a couple weeks ago. We contacted HLB. And it has gone up since he quoted us in January. This is a quote from yesterday, even though the date was wrong on the, I think I might have to run it down. But it's 213,000 and change now. The one caveat is there's always the chance there could be a change, and we won't know it now, but there might be some change later in some shipping costs or some smaller costs like that, and those can change, even though it's under state contract, those are sort of fungible at the end, and it's in the hundreds, not thousands, so it would a ton of money if there was an adjustment there. But this price is the overall price of the unit is guaranteed, and we would get it in 12 months. So it's a municipal price, and you couldn't buy it as an individual, you can't buy it as a company, it's only these are municipal trucks, and that's it.
So the changes to the budget that you last saw from March 16th are listed on page 6. And I believe we have to do the resolution to accept these changes. They are reflected in the document that you have in front of you. They're, I think, pretty much the same as they are.
So we want to make changes in all of these accounts, correct? Or is it? Yes.
See where it says March 6th?
Yeah, oh, yeah.
That's what it was, and that's the number.
Yeah. No, I don't want, I want to discuss what we need to discuss, but can we do this as a one resolution?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. A motion to accept the changes in the document entitled Changes from March 16th to April 5th, 2022.
I'll make that motion.
So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
Just a couple clarifications. When you say easier analysis on the F-2142, what does that mean? That your software allowed you to project out a better or a more reasonable or accurate?
Do you remember after we got the software, I sent you a bunch of reports? I
Yes.
inundated you because I was so excited because they gave such good thing, monthly, you could track things monthly easily. So,
So that's part of that.
yeah.
Okay.
And just track down a mistake that I made. I had extra. I counted some things twice in my Excel formula. And she flagged those.
So we're only estimating a less than $1,000 increase in sales tax?
Sales tax is always,
I'm not saying we should
Yeah.
do more, I'm just,
I imagine we'll probably.
yeah, I might be underestimating that because Saratoga's been, even during the pandemic, I mean,
Yeah.
Round Lake was always slightly positive, while
Yep.
the other communities in the county were negative. I went conservative there.
The last column is the proposed budget, like for the 50, the first item, the 51, it's got 19,821 in it. Oh, that's the revised. Got it, never mind. So overall DPW is salaries.
You can't find it that way because they're divided into like 20 different
Yeah.
places.
I know Jess had given us that.
Yeah,
thing
yeah.
before.
it's on, page 5.
The one thing I was curious about overall with the budget, not, this is, I guess, separate from the changes, so maybe we go ahead and approve the changes first, but it was just interesting to me that the sewer fund balance remained fairly constant over time with a slight increase, and the water fund increased much more, and the formula is used for.
Well, we have a lot, substantial fewer numbers of sewer users than we do water.
Just Griffin's Ridge though, right? Is that the?
And there's a
There's
surprising
about
number.
50 people in the village who don't. live
Okay,
around the
so
village
that
who
accounts,
have
okay.
village sewer,
And the good
Okay.
news, in
which is
two years, possibly 3, that $62,500 payment goes away
Right.
because it's a 20-year bond. So
But I was just curious, I mean, I guess the variable, because the sewer is basically charges a flat rate for everybody that has a sewer connection, right? And that's it. And with the water fund, it's a flat rate plus whatever you use in
Right.
gallons. And the water fund has increased substantially, whereas the sewer fund has remained fairly, I mean, it's increased, but not to the same extent. So it would seem to me that the variable would be what we're charging for
yeah,
water usage
part
is
of it, I
part of the
think,
reason why
was
the funds increased so much.
I overlooked during the water project. I over budgeted in the water account because the grant was paying for some of the things that normally, like the engineer, we had 10,000 there for the engineer, and it didn't occur to me, and it should have, and it didn't occur to me to back that out of the budget because the water project was paying for that.
Gotcha.
So that over 3 years is 30,000 of the surplus. So that was.
So that situation where we discovered that Amador had a second
Oh, yeah.
sprinkler system that they hadn't told us about, so we had to figure out how much they owed us for the past like 5 years.
Yeah.
And that was like.
Well, they had a second sprinkler system?
Yeah.
That was like 7,500 that just came
Oh.
in as revenue,
Curious.
so that was.
All right, motion is on the table. Oh, yeah.
So why did the snow removal go up so much? Is that because we're now doing?
That would probably be for adding another person because we put a lot into the snow removal budget. But as I said, the DPW salary is some's in snow, some's in parks, some's in water, some's in sewer, and yeah. Discussion over? Good? Paul?
Yes.
Yes.
Stephen?
Next is the DEC Forestry Grant Resolution. I'm working on a DEC Community Forestry Grant to try to purchase the piece of property at the northeast corner of the village by the Round Lake Bypass and Route 9. I'm willing to sell it, so for, I believe, $275,000. It's a 90% reimbursement grant from if we are to get it, and so we would need to pay 10% of that. So here is I'll read the resolution. Whereas the Village of Round Lake wishes to pursue a New York State Department of Environmental Conservation Community Forest Conservation Grant, and whereas this grant is a matching reimbursement grant providing a 90% reimbursement to successful applicants, therefore be it resolved that the Round Lake Village Board of Trustees agrees, if said grant is obtained, to fund the purchase of the Van Patten parcel up to $275,000, $90,000 of which will be reimbursed. 90% of which will be reimbursed. The remaining amount will come from parkland funds.
Are you making the resolution, Gary?
Oh, sure, I'll make the resolution. Discussion?
You can get it for that kind of money. Money well spent.
Beautiful spot.
Yeah.
Pardon? Oh,
Yes.
Yes.
yes. Next, the jet ski law resolution. Once again, whereas the Round Lake Village Board of Trustees wishes to amend Chapter 168 of the Village Code to provide that personal watercraft may not be operated within the Village of Round Lake or launched from real property owned by the Village of Round Lake, and whereas the Board of Trustees finds that the proposed action is a Type 2 action as defined by 6 NYC RR 617.2, and no further action is necessary to comply with the New York State Environmental Quality Review Act. And whereas the Round Lake Village Board of Trustees held a public hearing concerning the proposed amendment of Chapter 168 of the Code of the Village of Round Lake to provide that personal watercraft may not be operated within the Village of Round Lake or launched from real property owned by the Village of Round Lake of the Village of Round Lake on the 6th day of April 2022 at 6:30 p.m. at the Round Lake Village Hall, 49 Burlington Ave, Round Lake, New York, at which time and place all persons desiring to be heard were heard. Now therefore, it is resolved that local law number 1 of 2022 is adopted, and the village clerk is directed to file the same with the New York State Secretary of State forthwith. That's not local law number 1.
Of this calendar year?
Is it really? We're slackers. Wow. Wow. Okay. So moved.
Second.
Discussion?
I just wanted to make one comment. I know there was a bit of an aggressive response to this in terms of enforcement. The last time we talked about it, and I just want to caution those who might be involved in that, that if a guy's sitting in the parking lot with a jet ski and he's eating a sandwich in his truck, you can't presume he's going to launch the jet ski. So I know
Your point is well taken.
these people are not from around here, and we don't have a ton of authority, but I know the person can handle it if pressed. So I just want to make sure that we don't. The simple fact that somebody's down there with one.
Yes, we shall
Yeah.
discuss enforcement with the appropriate people.
Just be cautious.
And we will be putting a sign up there saying no jet skis or watercraft. And quite honestly, that will be the primary enforcement.
You know, it's interesting that I was looking at that chart with all the other launch sites. And, you know, we are significantly above the others. And I just believe that's largely due to the fact that there's very little public access to some of the lakes around here. And it just has nothing to do with the jet ski law, but, you know, we have a situation in Saratoga Lake now with a significant piece of property on the south end of the lake that's been sold. And we're hearing that the town board is thinking about, you know, allowing condominiums there. And, you know, if there's any place.
But they will have 5 parking spots for public access.
If there's any place that begs for more public access to Saratoga.
I'm going to write a letter to their planning board and show even in the wintertime, the cars lined up on Route 9.
It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. But anyway,
No, you're absolutely right.
thank you for listening. Yes.
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 Yes. Village attorney. Village mayor. Village trustees. Any wisdom to share?
No.
No,
No.
we're gonna have another public comment. too.
Public comment? Nope. All right.
Do we have reports from anybody?
That's next meeting.
Sorry.
And I won't be here, I'll be at a conference.
So I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. In favor?
Was this budget was it adopted tonight?
No. So you still have an opportunity to.
I think I said my grants.
No.
You know,
Great minds thinking alike. We're thinking along the same way.
Somebody's gonna watch them. Sorry.
well, you know, when you get up to $1 million, then you have to start putting those tracking things on.